Okay, I'm very pleased to be here to talk to UKSG, and I hope there's going to be some themes in here that you're going to find interesting. The question I have is research evaluation. Why is it relevant to librarians? And I think that the question could just as easily be turned around, and you could ask the question, why are librarians relevant to research evaluation? And I think when we look at these questions, we're going to see that there's a lot of needs out there and a lot of opportunities for librarians. So to start with, I wanted to look at the question within that of who measures the performance of researchers. And one of the answers is there are university ranking schemes out there, and that's one way in which research is evaluated. So the kind of schemes that you would see, there's the Academic Ranking of World Universities from Shanghai, and there is the QS World University Rankings, Times Higher, and Webometrics. And there are lots of others, but those four in particular are ones that I looked at and wrote a report for the University of Warwick on a couple of years back now. And what you see when you're looking at these rankings is that they are looking at where our researchers are publishing, what they're publishing, and they're looking at citation data as well. And I think this is relevant to librarians because, of course, these products, these citation data sources, are ones that we subscribe to and that we provide to the university. And so for us to be able to explain how this data is being used by others and how it's relevant to the university, I think is an important role that we can play. So other people who are measuring researchers. We've heard a little bit about REF 2020 this morning, but before we get there, we've got to go through REF 2014. And for those who don't already know about the REF, the basics are that there are different units of assessment that are going to be subject-based, where peer review panels will be looking at the research outputs of our university departments and then ranking them, scoring them. And the kind of weighting that you get, there's 65% that's going to be on research outputs. And some of those peer review panels will be receiving data about the citations for the outputs. It's mostly science, technology, medicine kind of areas that the arts and humanities are not getting those kind of reports. The data that's coming is going to come from Elsevier Scopus, and the research outputs make up just 65%. What's new in the UK is the 20% on impact. That hasn't been measured before. So this is something that researchers are struggling to understand. What is impact in the context of REF? How do they achieve it? How do they demonstrate it and report on it? So there's one sort of need and opportunity around that for librarians who know about social media and how you can use it to achieve impact and how you can measure what you're doing with social media to demonstrate those benefits. So impact in the REF context does not include the reach within the academic sector. It's about the reach and significance beyond the academic sector. The environment, just 15% there, that's about the vitality and sustainability of the department. So it might include things like how many PhD students there are, what kind of training opportunities there are, and what support there is at your university. So I wrote a statement about what the library offers in support of researchers that is held on a central file, and all of our departments can use that central statement as the basis for their for their environment statements. So that's just another example of who is measuring research. You've also got your funders, the RC UK being a prime example of those, and again they got a mention this morning. RC UK have a system which they call the Research Outcomes System, and our universities are reporting on our outputs and outcomes from our research to ROS, and the kind of things that we're reporting about, the evidence base that they then use to report to government, to the public and other organisations, are the publications, of course, but other kinds of materials, so exhibitions or websites or other materials that the research might have produced. And staff development, how the staff have been developed through the projects, what kind of collaborations have taken place or partnerships that might then be a product of that research, communication and dissemination activities, and again impact is featuring there, and it's a slightly different definition of impact than you're going to get for the REF. So if you do see the word impact and your role is also supporting researchers, then make sure you get a definition of what they mean by impact. It varies from one kind of body to another. How this is relevant to librarians? Well, I think obviously the repositories and the CRIS systems that quite a lot of libraries are running and working with are going to be important sources of data, both for the REF and for the RC UK in these kind of reporting mechanisms. And librarians obviously have expertise in metadata, and that's also going to be crucial for these repositories and CRIS systems, what kind of metadata should be recorded and how it should be handled. So the institution will also be interested in evaluating researchers, possibly the institution centrally or possibly the head of department, probably both, and they may have different things that they will be looking for. They're going to be looking at researchers when they're recruiting them. They're going to be looking at them through performance review mechanisms, things like when they apply for merit pay or if they're applying for promotions. What they might be looking for, I think the three things that I've mentioned first there, the number of and quality of publications, the grant income, the PhD students that they supervise, those are all things that they might be looking for. But I think each institution and indeed each head of department is going to vary a little bit in what they're interested in. There will be other things they'll be looking at, and they will measure those first three things in slightly different ways, depending on which university rankings they think are significant, depending on what's significant in their discipline. I think one of the things that are interesting in this area is the Snowball Metrics project. Elsevier are working with 8 other universities in the UK. Warwick isn't one of them, but I think it's a really interesting project. And the Snowball Metrics project has got a recipe book that's only just been published. It's come out recently, and it explains how those universities have agreed to measure certain elements of researcher performance. So, for instance, when it comes to grant income, they specify that you should be counting the value of the grant income and also the number of grants. And they specify that you should be counting this yearly and by quarter, and that you should be able to look at the whole figure, but also then per FTE at the institution. And that's going to allow benchmarking amongst those member institutions. So again, this could be an opportunity for institutions or heads of department to then showcase their researchers. They're going to have the confidence to do that because they know from the benchmarking where their strongest measures are. And this could be interesting for librarians who are supporting researchers, again, because of the sources of data that they would be using in pulling those kind of measures together. And then I think also researchers themselves are going to be interested in evaluating their research. And I think this is really an important area for librarians who support researchers, especially those who offer training on things like the H-index. So researchers want to know what they should be putting on their CV, what they should be putting into those performance review documents. They want to know how they reach target audiences that are important to them, so where they publish. And they want to know how they can enhance the number of citations for their articles. If there anything they could do that would give them that chance. I think when it comes to peer review, things may or may not be changing, but it's an area to keep an eye on. Researchers are obviously evaluating each other's performance through peer review for journals, but also on those REF panels. And indeed, some of them serve as editors on journals, and they have that kind of role in evaluating research as well. And indeed, reviewing the reviewers, because they know who they want to send articles to for peer review, who's going to respond quickly. And I think all of these kind of things require metrics to be recorded, and it's going to come back a little bit to that metadata as well. But I do think there is another question we need to be looking at, not just who is measuring the research, but also what data and tools and measures there are out there. And this is an area of opportunity because there are a lot of different data and tools and measures out there for the researchers to use if it is them looking to measure the research for themselves. So a shorthand for quality could be the journal title. A lot of journals have a brand which is well known and trusted that would have been built up. They have this cachet from their history because they're known to have good peer review processes. They attract a lot of good quality submissions, and they have high circulation. All those different features that we will be looking at to say this is a good quality journal. And it has been suggested to me by a researcher that maybe the REF panel members won't read every article that is submitted for the REF, and they might score those that appear in certain journals much higher anyway, just because they're in Science or Nature or The Lancet or whatever is the prestigious journal. I wouldn't want to cast aspersions on the process. I'm sure they do all read every article, but there is that element of potential. It might influence them to think that that is a high-quality item, fits in a high-quality journal. I think there are a lot of other journals other than those that have that high brand awareness. And how do our researchers evaluate those journals? Some are talking at the moment about the PLOS One journal and what that brand means to them. So some of them see this as a good place to publish because they know that researchers who publish there want to get their research out fast, and others think it's less of a good place to publish. Perhaps they've got some preconceptions about the peer review process in that journal. So the journals get their own brands. But if they don't, then these are the kind of sources that I point our early career researchers and PhD students to when they want information about journals. So one of the things I start with is Ulrich's, because it's got so many journal titles on it. I think it astounds them how many journals there are out there that they've never heard of that might be relevant to their research, might be worth exploring a bit further. Obviously, the DOAJ, the Directory of Open Access Journals, for those researchers who are interested in open access, could be a useful source. And of course, we do explain about JCR, the Journal Citation Reports on Web of Knowledge. So we explain the difference between 2-year, 5-year impact factor. We explain they might be interested in the immediacy index because that's going to be a signal that they would be cited more quickly after publication. And we explain these different kinds of measures to the researchers on JCR and again on SJR. They have similar kinds of equivalent measures, and on SNP as well, you can look those up on Scopus. Recently, we've got Google Scholar's own metrics that have come out. So if you look on the Google Scholar homepage, just on the top right, it has a link that says metrics. And if you click on that, you can look through to see their subject categories for the journals. The European Reference Index for Humanities, I recommend to the humanities students, and the heartsing.com website for the social sciences. So we say to them to look at the data about these journals and to measure all the different factors that are going to be important to them. And maybe if they're looking for an upcoming journal, they're looking for one that's got an impact factor that's growing, that's increased year on year. So as well as those kind of journal level information and that helps researchers to evaluate their research, there's the article level measures, and these are growing hugely. Researchers can obviously sort the results by number of citations in some of the tools that we have, and they can also, there are some journals which will display the number of visitors or downloads or citations per article, and not only journals but also the repositories as well. There are reviews and comments by readers available. There are likes and bookmarks and scores or ratings by readers, and there's news and media coverage. So there's lots of different measures at that article level that might be out there, but how do you find them out and how do you measure them, and what do those measures mean? Are things that I think our researchers need answers to before they're going to use them intelligently. And I think these things are known as altmetrics, quite often, altmetrics being alternative metrics to the citation measures. People criticise altmetrics for being open to manipulation, for having no particular authoritative source, but I think those criticisms can also be levelled at citation measurement, and they could also be useful as a whole if you're looking at all those different kinds of measures. And in this area, there's a lot of need and opportunity for librarians to step in there. So I wanted to give an example of a page about a researcher. This is somebody at the Hong Kong University, and the features that I wanted to point out on here. you've got the author ID here, you've got the researcher ID here, you've got two different H indexes that are displayed, and you've got Microsoft Academic Search author ID. So the author ID is very important, and you're going to hear more about that soon. But also on the left-hand side there, he's got his networks of collaboration on display, and he's got his grants on display. There's a lot of information about that researcher that's being shown, that's being displayed. So if I was that researcher, I'd want to know about all those kinds of measures and what might influence those. Another example I wanted to give you was an example of a journal article that's showing some of the measures. This one has used the altmetric tool. Now, what I would say about all the tools that are available, both for journals to gather altmetrics and display them, but also for you as a researcher to look at them, there's a lot of tools out there. And the altmetrics.org website is brilliant. It lists a lot of the tools, and you can find out lots more information. There's also a report that's come out recently from the SURF Foundation, and it's called Users, Narcissism and Control. And it's a very good report on these kinds of tools about the altmetrics at that article level. So I just wanted to give you an example there of a journal and some of the measures that are on display. So I think that librarians have a role in research evaluation. They are relevant to research evaluation because they play that role as repository and CRIS managers. They're a source of information for others who evaluate researchers. They're also guides to our library subscription sources and to the citation data and publishing patterns and trends, the way things are shifting at the moment. They are expert advisors on these kinds of altmetrics and how they can best be used, because librarians have that understanding of metadata and the kind of measures that have existed for many years. And I think in answer then to the question that we had, which was about how are librarians relevant to research evaluation? Sorry, it's the other way around. Why is research evaluation relevant to librarians? It's relevant because there are opportunities there for us. The article level economy that people talk about looks like it's coming. The altmetrics looks as though it's going to support interest in other kinds of outputs than journal articles, because they can also measure those kinds of outputs. And those kind of things could also be linked to the articles. We talk about data sets that are linked to the journal articles. That's a big thing I'm looking at the moment. And I think that in this changing landscape, a lot of researchers get nervous and they have a lot of questions, and some of them do sound a little bit stupid questions, like somebody mentioned earlier. But what the researchers are looking for is someone with technical expertise and answers who's going to be reassuring, and I think that librarians can provide that. Thank you.